head on. Hello, I'm Ian Holmes. Very pleased to have this inaugural edition of this show here on Shaw Cable, bringing you the news events around Central Vancouver Island, an opportunity, a forum to bring these in-depth issues and discuss them with newsmakers around mid-Vancouver Island. And for our first episode, we're going to be talking about the possibility, and it's an old topic around Nanaimo, a multiplex in Nanaimo. It's something in the vicinity of 5,000, maybe to 8,000 seat arena, potentially in downtown Nanaimo. It's been a conversation piece in this city for about 15 years now in terms of serious discussions, and now talks heating up a little bit more with Mayor John Rattan engaging community groups about this concept, and also WHL Commissioner Ron Robinson on record saying he wants a WHL franchise in Nanaimo. Of course, the Victoria Royals in their second year in the WHL, it makes that a perfect marriage in that regard. So to break this down, we have a couple of guests to get into it a little bit. We'll have some conversation, a little bit of debate. We'll shoot some ideas around the table. And my first guest here, George Anderson, Nanaimo City Councillor, 22-year-old in his first term on Nanaimo City Council, a lifelong Nanaimo resident. And George, thanks for coming on the program.
Yes, well, thank you for having me on today.
And also Bob Bayliss, a third-generation Nanaimo resident, well-known Nanaimo figure, a realtor in Nanaimo, and a passionate hockey fan, and certainly on the side of beating the drum of getting a multiplex in Nanaimo. Bob, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
All right, the first question, we'll pitch it to you, George, and then an opportunity for you, Bob, to get your opinion in on this. The public appetite in Nanaimo for a multiplex. George, I know you've engaged the public a little bit through Twitter, getting some seeds out there in the community on what the public thinks about the concept. What are you hearing about there in terms of just the idea on the surface of multiplex in Nanaimo?
Well, the first thing I'll tell you, Ian, is that the City of Nanaimo undertook a strategic plan at the beginning of our term, and that was a 6-month process where we went out to the community and said, what are the things that you believe are important to move Nanaimo forward? And they revolved around water, building partnerships, waterfront enhancement, transportation and mobility, asset management. And those were some of the priorities that people in Nanaimo said that they wanted to focus on. And unfortunately, a multiplex was not identified in that entire project. And the City of Nanaimo spent roughly $125,000 to go out and find out what the people in the community want. And since I've been on council, not one individual has come to me to say, we need a multiplex. But if we are going to have a multiplex, it needs to be something that is in both the best interests of the taxpayer and also the private person who's going to come in and help pay for it, because that's the big question, is who's going to fund it.
Well, and funding is obviously a huge issue in terms of getting a multiplex in Nanaimo. If this thing's all on the public, and as a City of Nanaimo taxpayer, I mean, that's something that's just not going to fly in the city. I don't think there's much question about that. You need that strong private component to make this work. Bob, what about you? The appetite, you're so entrenched in the hockey community in Nanaimo. Do you think people want this thing?
Well, like you said at the opening, this has been batted around for onwards to 15 years, and I think majority of the folks that I'm involved with would love it. You know, not only would it bring hockey tournaments here, but you know, when they talk multiplex, they talk the entertainment industry as well. So it's a place for the community to come and enjoy events. So it's not just one-dimensional as an ice rink, but concerts, conferences, a gathering place. And if they're identifying the waterfront as a place where they'd like to have it, boy, they could tie that in with the cruise ship, get a casino going, a hotel, the whole infrastructure downtown would be awesome. So I think that people I talk to would love it. But like I said, it's been a lot of talk and no action for many, many years.
In terms of funding this thing, you touched on it, George. That's the multi-million-dollar question, as it were, in terms of putting this together. It's a massive project, and you don't want to saddle the taxpayer with a majority of the cost of something that could cost in the neighborhood of $70, $80 million we're looking at here for a multiplex. Where does that stand with you, the funding model? What's the right level, the right gauging to make this thing work here in Nanaimo?
Well, the funding model really, it depends on what the community, or city staff, and whoever is going to also put up a bill for this, because you're looking anywhere from $50 million to $100 million for a multiplex. And Abbotsford, they spent $85 million on their multiplex. So the one thing with a multiplex as well is that it's not going to come free. You're going to have to put some type of funding in it. And a lot of the time, unfortunately, there is an annual subsidy from the municipality who's giving money to make sure that it's actually functioning so that the person's not leaving. So there's going to be additional funding that does have to come from the municipality on an ongoing basis. And if that's what the community wants at the end of the day, it's really about prioritizing where you're going to go. And if it's asset management, you have to look at that. But if you have to look at the specific things that you want your community to move forward, and at the end of the day, you're going to have to try and decide which way you're going to go with that. So you're going to have both partners coming together at the table to decide which way the funding model is going to work.
Bob, the funding model, what's it going to take to make this fly in Nanaimo?
Well, I really firmly believe a partnership is needed, and not only from municipalities, but provincially, federally, First Nations, the Port Authority. You know, I mean, if they're going to have cruise ships coming into Nanaimo and offering up entertainment at the multiplex, I mean, it's going to benefit all. The downtown core, I mean, you know, it's going to benefit everyone, but everyone also has to pitch in. It just can't be thrown at the feet of the city of Nanaimo. And like all three of us sitting here, I'm a taxpayer too. So, you know, we got to keep our eye on the bottom line.
And a related topic, and I'll get a response from you in a second here, George, on taxpayer fatigue. You alluded to that on that answer. Costs are really rising at Nanaimo City Hall. The budget's in the neighborhood now of $175 million, and costs on all fronts moving up at City Hall. That threshold of taxpayer fatigue is maybe a multiplex just seen as a luxury maybe Nanaimo can't afford. Well,
can't afford, but can't afford not. You know,
that's one way of putting it.
I mean, as we build our community, we have to offer things for people to come here. And I'll just give you an example. A friend of mine just moved to Peachland in the new year, and was so excited to go to a Western Hockey League game in Kelowna, and just the whole experience for him was awesome. And we got to think about folks coming into our community. What do we have to offer? You know, we have great facilities here. The outdoors with Parks and Rec, baseball facilities, soccer facilities, arenas. Do we want to take that next step, you know, to bring in concerts? And listening to the news the other day, I see Sting is coming to Victoria, and he's also playing Kelowna. Maybe he's not interested in GM Place. Maybe he wants to play small venues. There's a lot of entertainers that would rather work in a small venue than the large 18 to 20,000 venues. So, yeah.
George, you're on the front line when it comes to hearing from the taxpayer in terms of value for their dollars. So, something like this, what do you think? The taxpayer fatigue. This is such a massive project. Do you think this is something that resonates in a positive or negative way with people?
Well, it's very true. The city of Nanaimo has roughly a $175 million budget. But at the same time, as I said earlier, it does come down to making priorities about what's important for the community. I think everyone would like to have a brand new facility in our downtown core, wherever it may be, that is used to drive economic development. But at the same time, we have assets within our city, and that's one of the priorities within the strategic plan that says that council wants to focus on making sure that the assets such as roads, sewers, and our infrastructure are actually taken care of. So I think a multiplex probably will come one day. Is it right now? Perhaps not. Maybe it is if someone actually wants to come in and put up the bill for it. But people in the community are telling me that we want to make sure that we are putting our money in the correct areas, and they identified those when they were involved with the strategic plan.
Bob, what kind of an impact would a multiplex have in Nanaimo moving ahead for the future?
What sort of an impact it would have? Well, I believe it would be positive. I mean, I can only look at the other communities around the province, you know, Prince George, Kelowna, Penticton, Victoria, Abbotsford, that George alluded to, and Langley. All these communities have multiplexes, and I guess the question is, how are they doing? And how do they pay for it? I don't have the answers to those questions.
And George, the same question for you. The impact of a 7,000 seat rink, say, in downtown Nanaimo, the epicenter of entertainment in Nanaimo.
Well, I think it could have an impact. It might be a great thing for economic development within the city, but at the same time, we also have to make sure that it's a viable option for the city, because if you look at many other communities, there's only 365 days in the year, and their multiplexes are only functioning 40 days out of the year. So if we're going to do it, we need to make sure that we do it right, because what are we going to be doing with the other 325 days of the year? So it could have an impact, but at the same time, if there's no one using it, it may have an opposite impact of what we want to actually happen for the city.
No, timing is a bit of an issue here too. You have Ron Robinson, the commissioner of the WHL, saying that he wants to be in Nanaimo. He's met with recently Mayor John Rattan. You have some franchises that potentially could relocate. So timing, this opportunity may not last forever, Bob. So if Nanaimo maybe doesn't hop on, they may miss that WHL train. Do you see this as a pivotal time in getting this thing, at least in the foreseeable future, for Nanaimo Multiplex?
Absolutely, because you know who's knocking at the door is the Comox Courtenay area, and you know, if they're progressive and they want it, they've got the airport there, they got people moving into that area, they got Mount Washington, you know, they're attracting a lot of people there, and if Nanaimo's not going to jump on it, we're going to lose out, and it's going to go north of Nanaimo, and good for the Comox Valley, but too bad for Nanaimo. And so I think timing is critical, and George, any facility won't be used just for 40 days. You know, there's 40 maybe hockey events, but there's also concerts, there's trade shows, and there's more to it than just hockey, and that's why they call it a multiplex, because it's not a one-dimensional facility. It's a facility that can get used.
Comox Valley, it's a good point. I mean, they're pushing the 65,000 people mark in the valley. Timing is it an issue to make this materialize in Nanaimo, George?
Well, there has been discussions that I've heard of in the Comox Valley, but they've also actually just upgraded a lot of their facilities in the last 5 to 10 years at the tune of $10 million. So in that area is their taxpayer fatigue to also then put up an extra 60, 70, 80 million dollars. In places like Everett, for example, which is pretty close to Seattle, they have their multiplex, and they're actually having some difficulties with getting people to come there. And they have an area of 2 to 3 million people to work with. In Nanaimo, we might only have the capacity for 120, 130,000 people to work with. So it's really about making sure that there's a viable option in regards to making sure if there are concerts, hockey teams, because we don't want to build it just for hockey teams, because in Abbotsford, for example, they actually just lost their team, and now they don't know what to do with their facility. So if we're going to make sure that we do it, we need to do it right, so that it's a viable option for the community, and the community is not at a loss, because it has to be a win-win for the private sector if they're the ones who come along, and the residents of the city of Nanaimo.
Well, one thing's clear, the conversation has started. Mayor Rattan's going to go to the community groups in the imminent future to gauge that community support, and perhaps that's when you get the private sector, people that are interested in owning WHL clubs in a premium market like Nanaimo. Then that's when things start to generate and get a little bit more of a clearer picture, because right now it's really quite preliminary, but I got the feeling that it's a topic that won't be going away anytime soon. We'll see if it picks up steam or if it kind of dies, which it has in the past, Bob, but it'll be interesting. We'll be watching. It'll be very interesting to see what happens here.
Well, and I agree with you. I think everyone would love to see this type of facility in our community. We can showcase what's great about Nanaimo, but we need to make sure that we do it right. And that's what my concern is as a city councillor, is making sure that the taxpayer and the residents of our community are also getting their fair share, and it's best for them as well.
Perfect. We're flat out of time. Thanks so much for this conversation, guys. George Anderson, Nanaimo City Councillor, Bob Bayliss, third generation Nanaimo native, passionate hockey fan, wants that multiplex. George likes the idea, but the numbers got to match up, which is obviously needs to happen for the electorate to be on board with this. So thanks so much for joining me for tonight's episode of Head On. More episodes coming up on future broadcasts on Shaw Cable. Good job, guys.